My experiences with the sea didn't start until I was 15, when I learned to swim. In fact, before that, I was quite afraid of the water. Bob Greeny, a friend in Somerset in northwest Tasmania, helped me learn to swim by lending me goggles, snorkel and flippers. In those early days, we would free dive to catch fish and crayfish. We even discovered the wreck of the SS Southern Cross at Rocky Cape. Free diving for crayfish in the 1960s was easy. In one weekend near Granville Harbour, we caught over 100 crayfish. The 1960s was also the time when we got our first abalone licence for an annual fee of 10 shillings. Financed by a local accountant, we used 2 aluminium runabouts and a hooker to catch and clean abalone down the west coast. I was doing this while studying to be a teacher at the Tasmanian University. When the Tasmanian government rationalised the abalone industry, I had to choose between diving for abalone and teaching. I became a teacher. In 1972, I was transferred to Scottsdale High School as a Senior Master of Social Science. I started kayaking classes at Scottsdale High School, teaching students paddling and safety skills, including how to Eskimo roll. Students who passed kayaking skills test held at Bridport could enrol in a kayaking expedition. We went to places like Low Head, Waterhouse Island and even Shootin Island. In the early 80s, I became a founding member of the Maatsuyker Canoe Club started by Laurie Ford. We conducted extended sea kayaking trips, developing gear and equipment to allow long trips to places like Flinders Island. With wind against tide, crossing Bank Strait can be a challenging experience. Jenny and Ian, shortly after this photograph, had a capsize. Our self-rescue skills were well developed and they were soon back in the kayak. Maatsuyker Canoe Club also pioneered the development of sails and rudders, which took advantage of our Tasmanian windy conditions. This equipment, with our advanced Eskimo roll techniques, allowed us to take challenging trips even in winter. The Furneaux Islands are ideal sea kayaking locations, with beautiful coastlines and strong tidal currents that always keep you sharp. Taken on a trip to Flinders Island, this shows a type of kayak, sails and equipment that we used. A typical Maatsuyker Canoe Club mob standing on top of the granite boulders on Rum Island. Through our trips, we quickly found out where all the suitable campsites were around the Tasmanian coast, and although we paddled everywhere, we also frequently climbed mountains and visited historic sites. The wreck of the Farsund, as it was 35 years ago. It was wrecked in 1912. On this trip, Mick Berry and I actually climbed on board. Something you can't do today, as the hull is broken in half and deteriorated. Crossing Bank Strait on the return trip was always an interesting experience. Tasmania has many interesting offshore islands around its rugged coastline. I have visited Albatross Island 4 times, leaving from Woolnorth Point, stopping en route to the geologically interesting Steep Island, an extinct volcano. A typical camping setup on 3 Hammock Island on our way out to Albatross. Albatross Island, not an easy place to land, even in calm conditions. The island has 2 large caves running right through its centre. In here are thousands of albatross bones. The birds were harvested for their down and feathers in the 1800s. Just don't get too close to the fluffy white chicks, or they will vomit the contents of their stomachs all over your legs. Getting off Albatross Island can be just as challenging. Sometimes you have to push your kayak out into the sea and then dive in afterwards and climb on board. One of the most challenging of Tasmania's coastlines is between Strahan along the south coast to Hobart. With few safe landing spots, you might have to paddle 55 kilometres before being able to safely get ashore, and even then you may have huge waves that can dump you in the surf. Camping in remote areas is sometimes primitive, but at least with sea kayaking you don't have to carry all your gear on your back. Every 10 years, the club has to paddle out to Maatsuyker Island as part of its training program. Nearby Flat Top Island has a 3-entrance tunnel running through it, and we accepted the challenge. A succession of larger than usual waves punched through the tunnel. Then I was off. The noise in the tunnel is quite deafening, with waves cascading down the rocky sides. After we had calmed down a bit, we set off for Maatsuyker Island. Maatsuyker Island lies 17 kilometres south of the Tasmanian coastline and takes a full force of the roaring Forties. On the Needle Rocks to the south is a seal colony with hundreds of seals. To get up close, you have to negotiate the passages between the rocks. We have enjoyed the hospitality of the island each time we visited and were allowed to use one of the cottages. Maatsuyker Island is a special place that few people, even fishermen, have the chance to visit. Further to the west lies South West Cape, a rocky spine thrusting out into the Southern Ocean towards Antarctica. On my first trip around this cape made me feel very exposed and vulnerable as we looked down into the Southern Ocean. Later on, after entering Bathurst Harbour in Port Davey, after a long, hard, wet and windy trip, we were amazed to be offered a hot cup of tea by visiting yachties. They also invited us to their New Year's Eve party on the beach where we were going to camp. Next morning it was unexpectedly calm and peaceful, although our heads weren't quite 100%. We climbed nearby Mount Rugby, which soon cleared our systems of the hangover. Port Davey has amazing sea caves that you can explore in calm weather. On another trip, when paddling from Strahan to Hobart, we posed for a club photograph at Hibbs Pyramid. Returning southward, we had a following sea as we passed Port Davey and along the south coast. My new plastic sea kayak has more space, is easier to pack and was more stable. The northeast has some interesting sea kayaking destinations, including Black Point, near Lulworth. Here, an ancient lava flow shows strong columnar basalt, and nearby 20-Day Island has a seal colony. With underwater cameras, you get to see the seals in their natural element. Note that seals are quite shy when pointing a camera straight at them, but they just love chasing a moving kayak. Unusually, this mother seal pushed a seal cub towards my kayak and seemed to want me to do something. I have many memories of Tasmania's special places, returning from 20-Day Island, or the cliffs of Rocky Cape where I caught crayfish. Even the placid inland lakes like Lake Rosebery near Tulla, or maybe the magic of the Gordon River. Of course, the rivers are not always calm, and sometimes you have to put in the hard effort. Self-sufficiency and camping out is an essential part of the sea kayaking experience, and this is a typical scenario. Sea kayaking allows you to get up close to nature, including sea eagles and wombats. You can visit interesting historical sites such as at Pillinger in Macquarie Harbour. These can be accessed easily by sea kayak, and you can stay in converted railway carriages. The trip back to the starting point is not always easy, often against strong winds and currents. Down Tasmania's east coast are many favourite sea kayaking destinations, including Pirates Bay, Tasman Island, with its cliffs and caves. Though conditions change frequently, you can often see dolphins and seals. You have to be aware of changing conditions. Calm in deep Glen Bay Cave can't always be relied on.
You alright?
back paddling or forward? Are we mad? Hello, he's over. Oh, good one. Good one, Mick. Soon things really start to get hectic in the narrow channel. At one stage, I was sure Mick was going to go clean over top of us on a breaking wave. Fortunately for us, he capsized. Christ! Back her up, mate, back her up. Tasmania's changing sea conditions often produce challenging siege, which have to be coped with as you head down to Shootin Island to see the pygmy possum or bathe in the pools below the waterfalls. Blowholes on Bruny Island and looking up at the fossil cliffs on Maatsuyker Island are also sea kayaking musts. A Bass Strait crossing is always on the mind of any serious sea kayaker, and the Maatsuyker Canoe Club has done this trip twice. This trip usually leaves from Wilson's Promontory, crossing to Hogan and Deal Islands, before doing the 10-hour crossing past Craggy Island to Flinders Island. Finally, you have the notorious Bank Strait to cross to get back to Tasmania. In my 40 years of sea kayaking, I have paddled on a number of mainland Australian destinations, including the Whitsundays Islands and a circumnavigation of Kangaroo Island. On the Kangaroo Island trip, we were looking for the elusive mermaids.
We're going to know about this at the end of this. Especially if it picks up.
We started from Cape Jarvis on the Fleurieu Peninsula. It is 18 kilometres across the passage, and we were having to punch into a strong southeasterly. We had made allowances for the tide and hoped that conditions would improve as we got into the lee of Kangaroo Island. The unusually shaped Cape Border Lighthouse gave us valuable weather predictions for when we tackled the west and south coast of the island. My other mainland destinations include Lord Howe Island, with its spectacular mountains, and paddling from Eden down to Malakuta. Overseas, I've paddled in Fiji, Thailand and Tonga is a really special place. Overseas destinations include Milos and Croatia in the Mediterranean. In both these places, it was amazing to see that the sea floor is basically devoid of seaweed. In Croatia, we reflected on the fact that this country had suffered greatly in recent conflicts, but the people seemed happy and it was a beautiful place to paddle. Paddling the Aeolian Islands near Sicily put a whole new dimension on sea kayaking, being able to paddle around active volcanoes. The Pacific coast of Baja, Mexico has a contrasting geography, a new world history. Isolated coastal locations were visited, some only accessible by sea, and the harsh desert environment contrasted with the lush green of Tasmania. We did experience a rare desert thunderstorm, with water pouring down the rocks in huge torrents. We also managed to dive with the Mexican version of the sea lion, the ones that we'd seen in Kangaroo Island. Closer to home, New Zealand offers many sea kayaking experiences. We chose the North Island to paddle from the Bay of Islands to the north tip of the island. More caves, old whaling stations and abandoned Maori paths were visited. Of all the challenging experiences in my days of sea kayaking trips, probably the most life-threatening was here at Bridport. While surfing at the mouth of the river, an outgoing kayak struck me under the armpit, knocking me over. I realised I was in big trouble. First reaction, Eskimo roll. Second, shove my hand under my armpit to stop the bleeding. An hour later, at the doctor's surgery in Scottsdale, I was told how lucky I was. Hanging out of the wound was a main artery. If that had been cut, I would have been dead in minutes. My relationship with the sea has recently taken on a new dimension with the advent of new technology. Using a drone, I can now show people amazing scenes of whales feeding out in the bay. Huge humpbacks swallowing mouthfuls of water and straining out the krill. We certainly live in a lucky part of the world.